Welcome to the Vocation of the Business Leader podcast. I'm Greg Baustert. Here we explore how Catholic leaders let Christ and the teachings of the church he founded guide their work, integrating faith and business. Each episode offers inspiring stories to help you live an undivided life. Let's meet our guest, LaFave. LaFave?
LaFave, yes.
A strategic sourcing director at Elevance Health. Welcome, Pete.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's a real honor to be here. Really appreciate you having me on. I was looking at the guests that you've had on previously, some of whom I know well and have met. Real kind of heavy hitters, and so it's a real honor to be included among them. So thank you.
Oh yeah, you bet. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Well, so first of all, I'm a devout Roman Catholic. That's my faith is by far the most important thing to me. I'm married. I've got 6 kids under the age of 10. We live in Santa Paula, California, and like you mentioned, I am the strategic sourcing director in procurement at Elevance Health, formerly known as Anthem. And my roles there really come down to negotiating our strategic partnerships with our AI and health tech vendor partners. So I've been in that role for coming on about 12 years now.
Great. So tell us about your childhood and your early faith journey.
Sure. Well, going all the way back, so I was born in the Twin Cities, and I was baptized in the cathedral in St. Paul. So that church is beautiful. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to visit, but it's a just beautiful, large, imposing structure right there in downtown St. Paul. So I was baptized there. We lived in the Twin Cities for about 3 years. So when I was 3, my dad took a job in Butte, Montana. So he was a hydrogeologist, and he took a job at Montana Tech University, which is in a town called Butte, which I don't know if you or your listeners have been, but it's an incredible town. Just to give you kind of some history on it, it was an old mining town, copper mining town. And it really had its boom when they discovered copper there right around the time when they invented telephone wires, which were, coated with copper. So there was a huge demand. And so that town went from a small silver mining camp to this bustling town of almost 100,000 people. So it was, at one point, it was the largest town between, I believe, St. Louis and San Francisco. And it attracted all kinds of people at the turn of the century. Mark Twain visited, and just it had an incredible culture surrounding it. So, like I said, it was it had its boom, and then it had its bust, I think, around the 60s and 70s. As demand went down, a lot of the mines shut down in that town, and so it kind of went through a fate similar to a lot of the Rust Belt towns in the Midwest. So by the time we arrived, it was certainly, its heyday had passed. I'll put it that way. But it's an incredible town with beautiful, old brick buildings. Again, turn of the century. So it was a great place to grow up, and I was so fortunate to have 2 just incredible parents. They, from an early age, faith was very important to us, and I do give them a lot of credit because my siblings and I were homeschooled pretty much straight from the start, and this was, I think, early to mid 90s when not a lot of people were homeschooling. My parents really kind of went out on a limb, and they'd heard about it from some friends of theirs, and it was a great experience for me to have that that education. So I was the second oldest of six, and again, just faith was a very important part of our lives. And growing up in Butte, Montana, was a tremendous place to grow up. Lots of opportunities for skiing and hiking and things of that sort. So, like I said, I was homeschooled all the way through high school, and when the time came to choose a college, I was pretty unsure of where I wanted to go. It was, this path was, well, I could stay in Montana, go to a state school, become a ski bum, that kind of thing, or I could go to Thomas Aquinas College, which is a great book school in California. And so I went to the Thomas Aquinas College summer program. And, I think it was between my junior and senior year. And I fell in love with the college, with the Great Books program. And so ended up attending TAC. And I have to say it was by far the best decision of my life.
So how did you know about TAC, and any of your older siblings go there?
We had a family friend who had attended and had told us about the summer program. So my older sister attended the summer program, came back raving about it. And so that was kind of what led me to at least just check it out and to do that. But otherwise, we didn't really know anyone else that had attended. So I was the first of my family to go.
Now, you had told me previously that that you're a big supporter of liberal arts education. So, and also of the Newman Guide. So would you explain what the Newman Guide schools are, and then why you're so bullish on the Newman Guide schools?
Sure. So the Newman Guide it's a list essentially of recommended colleges that are faithful to the teachings of the Catholic faith. So, Thomas Aquinas College is one of them. Ave Maria, University of Dallas, Christendom, Franciscan University, Wyoming Catholic, John Paul the Great. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but it's schools that are in that vein, right? That they use kind of a rigorous set of criteria in order to list them. But you're absolutely right. I'm a huge believer in liberal education, specifically the one offered by the Great Books program at Thomas Aquinas College. So for those that are unfamiliar with the program, it's a set 4-year program. There are no majors, no minors. It's essentially studying the great books, all 4 years, no textbooks, all in the Socratic method. So essentially, the students do the readings. There's 17 per section. They do the readings in the off time, and they come to class prepared to have a thorough discussion on the text for that specific day. So really, I found that there's so much value in these, I'll just say, timeless treasures. Plato, Aristotle, Shakespeare, St. Augustine, St. Thomas, right? These works that have withstood the test of time. There's so much value in studying those, but also doing it in the style that Thomas Aquinas College does, which is the round table Socratic method. So I've found, for me specifically, especially in my career, that I learned so many unique skills because of that education. So being able to dive through a text, right, a long passage of St. Augustine, for example, being able to dive through, pull out the nuggets, and then come to class prepared to discuss with 16 other peers. It's invaluable, and it teaches you so many skills: analytics, reasoning, how to think, how to discuss, but also, I think most importantly, how to listen as well. I think there's that's a skill it's very underrated, but it's key, especially in business, right? When you're in a meeting and you're trying to solve a problem and you've got, you know, 5 people saying 5 different things, being able to parse through the conversation and then come up with strategic next steps. I mean, that was what we did every day at TAC. So that's why I'm I think going forward, I'm very bullish on TAC and others, the other Newman Guide schools as well that have these types of programs, but also just even the ones that emphasize the importance of our Catholic faith. I do believe that, especially in this, the current climate, that they'll have an outsized role to play in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah. One of the previous guests, John Johnson, is a big proponent of liberal arts. Yeah, he even has his Albertus Magnus Institute, which is
and that's a
promoting
great
that.
example because John is a very, very successful businessman, but he and I have discussed this as well, that there's a value in hiring graduates from colleges like Thomas Aquinas College and obviously others, within the Newman Guide. And that comes down to the fact that, while they may be green in terms of, specific business skills per se, they have the fundamentals, right? They've got the core principles. They know how to think. They know how to reason. They know how to listen. And again, they're good, solid people. So I know John is a big proponent of that, and I am as well.
I have a business degree, but they don't really teach you anything about business. When you get into the real world, it's a different story. So, yeah.
Right. I found that as well. And I tell this to graduates that are asking for advice, is that, look, you can learn kind of the latest, AI model, or how to use PowerPoint, or how to put together a deck, or how to do pivot tables in Excel, how to build a business case. You can learn all of those things fairly quickly, right? Especially with YouTube and things of that sort, right? What is harder and takes more time, and I think really gets to the value of schools like this, is, again, learning how to reason, analyze, and think. And then I think really the core of it all is, the faith, right? Underlying. I mean, at TAC, we had the opportunity to go to Mass 4 times a day, right? Or there were 4, I'll say there were 4 chances to go to Mass in a day. Confession before and after every Mass. So it was integrated in the life of the student. And I know that's the case at all the other Newman Guide schools as well. So I think that's another, that's another core piece of these schools and what makes them great.
So when you got out of school and you worked at Elevance, which is a huge company, how do you maintain your faith? I mean, what's the culture like, and how do you relate with so many people when you can't control the culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously, working for a large Fortune 20 company, it's going to be a different environment. But I like to think that, my faith really drives all that I do, right? Number one, trying to maintain the faith in an environment that's, not necessarily Catholic, but is secular. But also in trying to do, as good a job as possible, right? And kind of sanctifying my work, right, through my faith. I think that's very important. It was a a change. It was an adjustment, and I tell people that are looking for advice, right, on, hey, going from a place like TAC into a big corporation is like, there will be challenges, right, and there will be moments where you clearly have to not apologize for your faith, but also, explain the why, right? Like, for example, I've got 6 kids. So that often leads to questions right away. Like, why? Do you know what causes that? To which I say, no, I don't. uh, but I'm not afraid to say, yes, yeah, we've got 6 kids, and it's because and that often leads to a very interesting and often fruitful conversation. So I think there's a fine line, right? You can't, you're not quoting Aristotle or St. Thomas, right, in every business meeting, right? That's obviously one element, but you're also, you're not apologizing for the fact that you're devout Catholic. And so I think there's a fine line there that's very important to walk, but I think it's one that, you can figure out.
So before you went to Thomas Aquinas College, did you know what to expect and that how it would benefit you?
I knew at a very high level what the school was all about. What attracted me was the discussion method. I think that was because I was homeschooled, right? I was kind of used to a different method of learning than just say, going to the, going to the high school every day, sitting in class. And, for me, I was a little more self-directed. From an early age, we were encouraged, by my parents to read, which I think had a huge, that played a huge role, right? So I knew that that reading was a huge part of the curriculum, that there was a seminar style discussion. So those two were what really attracted me. But it was kind of beyond my wildest dreams in terms of when I got there, the culture, right? I grew up in a town. I had solid peers. Town was traditionally Catholic, but it wasn't anything like what I experienced when I came to Thomas Aquinas College, where all 350 students, I mean, which sounds small, but it's, you have pretty much the core principles in common with these people, and you could sit down and have a really great conversation with any one of these people. And so living that life for 4 years, and they have a policy where everyone stays on campus in the dorms for 4 years, which just really creates a just incredible environment where not only is it's rigorous education, but it's also you're living in community. You're living the good life, right? You're living a truly Catholic life. So I didn't really know that I didn't expect that to the extent that I found it. But when I did, it was incredible.
What advice would you have for young men starting out in their career?
That's a great question. So, and this kind of leads me maybe into how I got my role with Full Advance Health. So first and foremost, from a business perspective, I would say there's no such thing as luck. Really, you have to create your own luck. You have to come up with a habit of continuously putting yourself in a position where, where an opportunity might come your way, right? So I always just say, look, you have to create your own luck. So I'll give you kind of an example. So when I was a student at TAC, I think it was my sophomore year, I was asked by the school administration if I would take on the role of a prefect, which is kind of similar to an RA. And at first I was reluctant because that meant that I had to follow the rules and much more closely, I should say. And so I kind of went back and forth and do I really want to do that? But at the end of the day, I said, yeah, I'll say yes. Why not? Right. And so as a result of having that job, I was then, put in the position where I was invited to represent the school more often for, say, when groups were visiting campus. And so just another example. I received an invitation when I believe it was the Knights of Malta or the Order of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a group. They were attending the campus for a lunch, and I received an invitation. Do I want to attend? Since I was a prefect, do I want to attend and represent the school? And again, it was another option where I could have just said no. I'll blow that off. I don't. I've got something else I could be doing, but again, decided to say yes. And I went, and during that lunch, I just happened to be seated next to the college's vice president for development. And we got into a conversation around, my plans for after graduation. He said, well, what are you interested in? And I said, gosh, I think business. I'm still figuring that out. And he said, well, actually, it turns out my brother is visiting campus next week. He works for this large health insurance company in procurement, and that's something you should go check out. And I'd seen the flyers advertising that talk, but again, it was something that kind of gone in one ear and out the other, right? In terms of, well, I could attend that, or I could, go off campus and go to the beach, right? If it's a sunny day. So again, just kind of these examples of putting yourself in these positions to where you never know what opportunity can come out of that. So long story short, I attended that talk, and they were advertising summer internships for the following summer. And so I decided to apply, also because I was getting towards the end of my senior year. I was seriously dating my wife, who I'd met, or my then girlfriend at the time, my now wife. And I was like, well, I need a job. And so long story short, my whole point is that I tell young men, say yes to things, right? Make a habit of showing up, saying yes, opening yourselves up to these opportunities, and things will fall into place. So just quick continuation of that story, though. They had sent out a case study as a part of that application. And as a part of the case study, it was just a set of raw data in an Excel file. And they said, go through this data, put it into a PowerPoint presentation on your findings. It was spend data. Analyze this spend data, put it into a PowerPoint, and send it back. And so, I had not had a lot of experience with Excel or PowerPoint up to time, but kind of getting back to what we were talking about earlier, I went to the library, got onto YouTube, learned how to put together a good PowerPoint presentation, and ultimately I was selected as a finalist for that role, for that summer role, but I ultimately did not get offered that final position. So what I did right after school was I went and I worked on a political campaign out in New Jersey for a guy, Steve Lonegan, who was running against now Senator Cory Booker in the 2013 New Jersey special election. So I went out and I did that. I got that role because the campaign was being run by a TAC grad. And I have to tell you, that was some of the most, incredible trial by fire, business experience of my life. So my role was, I was coalitions director. So I was in charge of reaching out to pro-life groups, Second Amendment groups, religious leaders, so Catholic, Coptic, Jewish, Muslim, all of these potential voting blocks throughout the state of New Jersey. That was my task. So it was an incredible experience. It was very intense because it was a special election. So it was typically a 16-month campaign compressed into about a 4-month campaign. It was incredibly long hours, 15-hour days, but it was a tremendous experience. And so about halfway through that campaign, I got a call back from, at the time it was WellPoint. That was the name of the company. And they said, hey, the person who took that role that you'd applied for actually is leaving. Would you be interested in coming back and interviewing? And so I said, well, I'm working on this campaign, but it ends in about a month, and can I interview when I get back to California? And they said, sure. So that's, in short, kind of how I came to Elevance Health. So the bottom line is that for advice to young men, that's what I tell them, especially when it comes to business. In terms of just life in general, I'm a big proponent of the Tucker Carlson advice that get married young and have as many kids as possible. Now, I know that's not maybe the universal for every single person, but I think just in general, it's good advice. It's what I did, right? We got married pretty much right after my wife graduated, which was a year after I did. And I can just say the sense of purpose that being married and then having kids to provide for, the sense of purpose that gives you, especially in a job, in business. I mean, it just makes everything a lot more clear, right? You have kind of, sometimes I'll say like an angst with, finding your soulmate or, for people that are single, right? There's an angst or an anxiety there that when that's taken care of and when you have your mission clearly laid out, it just makes things so much more clear. So that's my general advice.
So you said that you have 6 kids under 10 and that you read aloud to them every night. And so tell us about that. So why is that so important and what benefits have you seen from that?
Yeah, that's a great point. So growing up, my dad read aloud to us pretty much every night. And I mean, we read all kinds of different books, but just, again, great literature. And I found that having that skill of learning how to listen, and again, kind of encouraging reading, that played a huge role for me growing up. So that's something I've tried to do with my own kids is, we read all kinds of different books. The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. One series is the Redwall series by Brian Jakes, which, I think after about 10 books, they kind of become pretty formulaic. But the reason I love those is because Brian Jakes, the author, uses these just very flowery, descriptive adjectives in his writing. And I noticed that for my kids, it impacts their vocabulary as well when they're just accustomed to listening. And so I've also noticed that they are now big fans of audiobooks as well. But they've developed that skill of being able to sit down and listen to a story for extended periods of time. And I think as that's something humanity for thousands of years, that was kind of our go-to, right? Sitting around the fire, listening to stories. That's how the works of Homer were handed down for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I'm a big fan of that. I've seen just a tremendous impact, and for me too, any excuse I can to reread The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, I'll take. So that's definitely our go-to.
Awesome. So you had talked about the before the recording the Catholic business ecosystem. So what is that to you, and what do you see as the future of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think you and I may have been connected through Scent Ventures, which, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Scent Ventures is this incredible network of Catholic founders and people that are in business and serious about their faith. And so when I look out there, I see organizations like Sent, I see organizations like Legatus, like Young Catholic Professionals, Opus Dei. You see a number of these institutes that have, really sprouted up around these prestigious schools on the East Coast, like the Morningside Institute, for example. I see just a whole variety of these overlapping networks. And I think it's very important to start looking at this network as an ecosystem rather than just kind of these separate parts. Really, because and we all know this and we all joke about this, just how small the Catholic world is, especially when you factor in like these Newman Guide schools and the communities surrounding these schools. So take Front Royal, Virginia, Santa Paula, California, Steubenville, Ave Maria, right? These are all kind of creating this ecosystem that then feeds into these really tremendous organizations. So I see a tremendous potential there in kind of harnessing that network, right? And thinking about how can we be more strategic as Catholics in utilizing this network. So I think groups like Sent do a fantastic job. And I think there's a lot of potential out there, especially when we see, graduates from these Newman Guide schools. How can we create talent pipelines to get these candidates good jobs? When they have good jobs, that in turn fosters families, stable families. That in turn fosters a sense of community, right? Especially in these hubs that I mentioned, right? When that happens, when you have stable communities, that begets, again, more solid people going into these schools. That fosters vocations, that fosters people, when people are in community, I think it's much easier to, stay within the faith and to create these, wholesome environments. So that's why I'm very bullish on kind of these networks. And I think that there's, like I said, tremendous opportunity in the next 5, 10, 15 years to think even more strategically. So I've been thinking of, some ideas in that front, and I'll just say stay tuned on that. But I think there's a tremendous opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, why not? Why not us? I mean, all these other communities, the Jewish community, there's, you name it, they do business together, and their faith together, and why not us? Absolutely.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think the networks are there. I think the networks are already there, and I think it just comes down to us thinking more strategically. And I think it starts really with, I think geography plays a big part of that. I think I look at these communities, especially, ours, for example, here in Santa Paula, there's a fantastic homeschool community, but there's also a really solid classical school called St. Augustine Academy. And then there's also St. Monica Academy down in Pasadena, not too far from here. So the most important thing for that is that having a community where you know and trust the peers of your kids, right? I mean, that's huge. But also having peers of your own that can help encourage you and just, again, foster that sense of community. I think there's going to be a real hunger, real demand for more of that as well, especially in the next 10 to 15 years. So like you said, why not us? I think there's a tremendous opportunity there.
So why do you think that it's not established already?
Well, I think I think the start of it is. I think the beginnings of it are there. already, especially when you look. When the fact that the Newman Guide is a thing, the fact that the Newman Guide exists, right? When you really step back, like, what is the Newman Guide? It's a stamp of approval, and by now we just, when we say, oh, it's a Newman Guide school, everyone kind of knows what we mean, right? And so, especially the fact that, as we're all having bigger families, and some of those kids will go to a specific, let's say TAC or Wyoming Catholic, but some others might go to Christendom, or you can just see that for these families, there's kids going to different schools. They meet their spouse there. They get married. They settle in one of these communities. They have a number of kids. And the cycle kind of keeps repeating, right? All through that time, those people are going into business, into roles, whether it's, some are becoming teachers, but others are starting companies, getting involved with Scent. Others are getting involved with Legatus, right? Others are getting involved with the Napa Institute. So I think the beginnings of a very incredible network are already starting, and I think the potential to, create even more incredible businesses, to start companies, to provide entertainment. I think of a group like the Floriani, who are a group of singers that specialize in chant and schola, and if you haven't heard of them already, check them out. But they've come out of TAC, but they're beautifying the church in sacred music. So I think you will start to see real impact coming out of these networks in the next 5 to 10 years. Companies, entertainment, right? Parallel entertainment that we can have our kids watch instead of Disney, right? Things of that sort. I think you'll start to see that come out very soon.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say is the vocation of the business leader?
I would say first and foremost to, evangelize through your work, right? Staying true to your principles. And I would say understanding the why and the purpose. At the end of the day, it's not just about the career, right? For me specifically, my job is first and foremost to get to heaven, to help my spouse get to heaven, help my children get to heaven, right? While we're on earth, fostering a solid home and a good community for my family to thrive in. So I think having in your career, ensuring that that's ordered properly, plays a huge role in your vocation. And then I think, while at work, right, standing strong for your principles. I think that's a very, important, something that, not to lose sight of. So I think that all of those kind of fit together as a key role for the vocation of a business leader.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to talk about?
No, I want to thank you for the time today and for having me on. And again, just, touching back on some of the things we've talked about, right? I'm so grateful, for everything God has done in my life and the direction that He's taken me through these, for allowing me the chance to attend a place like Thomas Aquinas College, getting involved in a place like Scent Network, meeting people like you, meeting people like, the folks that you've had on your show. I'm very grateful for. So very grateful for the opportunity today.
Well, you're a great member of the community. You're always giving, and we really appreciate that. And love your insights. You have an eye for beauty, and so are you really interested in architecture?
I am on the side. I'm a huge fan of beautiful buildings. So anytime that I see there's a new, say, a project in the works, a new design or something of that effect, I love sharing it. So I'm a big fan of sharing that on LinkedIn. encourage all your listeners, feel free to connect with me there. I love sharing interesting stories as well of things that are happening in our world. So to the extent I can help promote other people that are starting businesses or have their own organizations or getting involved in a specific project, I love to share that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Pete.
Thank you.
You're a blessing.
It's been a real honor. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today's episode of the Vocation Business Leader Podcast. We hope you found inspiration as we explore the powerful union of faith and business. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, share it, and leave a review. Until next time, may God guide your work and help you witness His love in all you do. God bless.
God bless.